The headlines shook the world. Turkey, a NATO ally and once a key U.S. trade partner, just dumped its American trade deals and signed a sweeping set of agreements with China. For decades, Washington believed that Turkey was firmly within its economic and political orbit. But today, Ankara has slammed the door on that illusion. And this decision is not just about trade, it's a signal to the entire world that America's grip on global commerce is slipping faster than ever before. America's tariffs, sanctions, and pressure campaigns have backfired. What was meant to intimidate and control has instead pushed nations into the arms of Beijing. The image of U.S. dominance has been shaken, and this moment marks a historic realignment of power in the global economy. Before we dive in, let me ask you, if the very nations America once counted on are now turning away, what does that mean for the future of U.S. jobs, U.S. exports, and U.S. influence around the globe? Make sure you stay tuned until the very end, because what's happening between Turkey, China, and the United States could reshape the next decade of world trade, and you need to understand exactly how deep this shift goes. And if you want to stay ahead of the curve with insights into the changing global economy, be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join our community. Because here, we break down the stories that others don't want to talk about. The breaking point. Turkey's decision did not happen overnight. For years, tensions between Washington and Ankara have been simmering. From disagreements over Syria and NATO policy to U.S. sanctions on Turkish industries, the cracks were already showing. But the final push came in 2025 when Trump doubled down on his tariff policies, targeting imports from Turkey and threatening penalties on Turkish exports, especially steel, textiles, and agricultural goods. For Turkey, a country with a rapidly growing population and ambitions to become a global logistics hub, these moves were the last straw. Ankara saw its exports squeezed, its companies sidelined, and its economy punished under U.S. trade restrictions. And while Washington believed this would force compliance, it achieved the exact opposite. China stepped in at the perfect moment. Offering new markets, new investments, and a chance to bypass U.S. sanctions altogether, Beijing became the natural partner for Ankara. Within months, talks accelerated into action. Now, Turkey has signed a historic set of contracts with China covering energy, technology, agriculture, and infrastructure. The result? America is out. China is in. And the global balance is tilting further east. Why Turkey's move matters. On the surface, Turkey may seem like just another mid-sized economy realigning its trade. But look deeper, and you'll see why this decision is a seismic event. Turkey's geography alone makes it one of the most strategically important countries in the world. Straddling Europe and Asia, Turkey controls access to the Black Sea through the Bosporus Strait, making it a vital trade corridor for energy, goods, and military routes. For decades, Washington leveraged this geography to secure NATO supply chains and trade flows. But by pivoting to China, Turkey is effectively rerouting these arteries of commerce away from the United States and toward Beijing. The impact is massive. Energy pipelines, shipping lanes, and new overland trade routes are being tied directly into China's Belt and Road Initiative. This creates a network where U.S. influence is diminished, while China strengthens its hold over Eurasian trade. The collapse of U.S.-Turkey trade. To understand the magnitude, let's break down what America has lost. For years, Turkey was a major importer of American goods, from aircraft and machinery to agricultural products. At its peak, U.S.-Turkey trade topped more than $25 billion annually. But those numbers have been in steady decline. Trump's tariffs in 2025 slashed Turkish steel imports into the U.S. by over 60%, wiping out one of Ankara's key export markets. On the other side, Washington imposed restrictions on Turkish textiles, electronics, and food products, effectively pricing them out of U.S. shelves. Instead of finding compromise, Washington doubled down, using trade as a weapon. That weapon backfired. Turkish manufacturers, once dependent on American buyers, now found eager partners in China, who not only purchased goods but also promised long-term investment in factories and logistics hubs. By 2025, Chinese companies were already flooding Turkish markets with cheap electronics, solar panels, and industrial equipment, goods that once came from the United States. Now, with the new trade agreements, this shift is permanent. America's share of Turkish trade has collapsed, while China's share has surged. China's strategic win. For Beijing, Turkey is a golden prize. This deal cements China's influence in a country that is not only an economic partner but also a strategic bridge between Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. China's trade contracts with Turkey include multi-billion-dollar energy projects, investments in 5G and digital infrastructure, and agreements for agricultural trade. But perhaps the most important piece is logistics. Turkey has agreed to expand its role in China's Belt and Road Initiative, linking railways, ports, and highways directly to Chinese supply chains. This means that Chinese goods will flow faster and cheaper into Europe, bypassing traditional US-controlled routes. It also means that Turkish exports will have guaranteed access to one of the largest consumer markets in the world, China itself. Beijing knows exactly what it's doing. By locking Turkey into its orbit, China has not only taken away a US partner but also gained a gateway to reshape trade routes across Eurasia. The US response. So how has Washington reacted? Predictably, with anger and disbelief. Trump has railed against Turkey's betrayal, calling it a direct attack on American workers and industries. He has threatened further sanctions, new tariffs, and even hinted at reducing US security support through NATO. But here's the problem: America no longer has the leverage it once did. Turkey has alternatives. With Chinese investments flowing in and European partners quietly backing Ankara's pivot, US threats no longer carry the same weight. In fact, each new American threat only drives Turkey further into Beijing's arms. It's the classic case of overusing economic pressure until it loses its effectiveness. The ripple effects on American workers. The collapse of US-Turkey trade isn't just a geopolitical headline, it's a direct hit to American jobs. Farmers who once shipped soybeans, corn, and beef to Turkey are losing contracts. Manufacturers who exported machinery and aircraft components are watching deals evaporate. According to early estimates, tens of thousands of US jobs tied to Turkish exports are now at risk. And because these losses are spread across multiple states, from the Midwest to the South, the political fallout could be severe. Trump's promise was to bring jobs back. But the reality is that his tariff wars are driving them away, as countries like Turkey abandon the US altogether. Europe watches closely. Europe is watching Turkey's pivot with unease. For Brussels, Turkey has always been a complicated neighbor, too big to ignore, too independent to fully control. With Turkey now aligning more closely with China, the EU risks losing its own leverage over Ankara. At the same time, European companies may benefit from new trade routes linking Chinese and Turkish supply chains directly into Europe. This could undercut American exporters even further, as Europe becomes more tightly integrated into the China-Turkey corridor. In other words, the US is not only losing Turkey, it's also losing ground in Europe. The larger picture: America's waning influence. Turkey's move is not an isolated case. It's part of a broader pattern where nations once firmly aligned with Washington are now reconsidering their options. From Latin America to Africa, and now Eurasia, countries are finding that the costs of US tariffs and sanctions outweigh the benefits of staying in America's orbit. China, by contrast, offers investments, infrastructure, and markets without the constant threat of penalties. And that message is resonating. What Turkey has done could inspire others. If a NATO ally can pivot to China despite decades of US partnership, what's stopping other nations from doing the same? The symbolic blow to US prestige may be even greater than the economic one. The future of US-Turkey relations. Turkey's shift away from the US is not just about trade, it's about sovereignty, independence, and long-term opportunity. Unless Washington abandons its tariff-heavy, confrontational approach and embraces true partnership, the old ties won't be restored. With both US parties locked into a zero-sum view of trade, compromise seems unlikely. The break may be permanent, signaling a deeper global power shift as Turkey turns from Washington to Beijing. For the United States, it's a warning: using trade as a weapon has consequences. Push too hard, and even your allies will walk away. For China, it's a triumph, one more step in its long-term strategy to dominate global trade. The world is changing. Old alliances are breaking. New ones are forming. And as Turkey's pivot shows, the future may belong not to those who cling to the past, but to those who adapt to the new reality. If America doesn't learn that lesson soon, it risks watching more nations follow Turkey's lead. Thank you for watching. If you found this breakdown valuable, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Drop a comment below, Do you think Turkey made the right move, or will it regret abandoning US trade deals in the long run? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Stay tuned, because this is just the beginning of a much larger story about the future of global trade and America's place in it.